I got to spend 2 days with the Pilatus PC-24, and this airplane is simply incredible. We did a thorough tour of every part of the plane and then flew it to a dirt strip to demonstrate why they call this the super versatile jet. In this video, I'll separate this into the unique features of its exterior, interior, cockpit, and the flight. And every single one of these sections had something really interesting in it that I just wasn't expecting. So the PC-24 is kind of in between a light and mid-sized jet. It has a maximum cruise speed of 440 knots at 28,000 feet, and at its maximum cruise altitude of 45,000 feet, we're going about 410 knots. You can configure it for up to 10 passengers in the back. One of the big things that makes this jet really unique is that while it's absolutely luxurious in every way, as you're gonna see, it's also really built for utility and versatility. And as you'll see later in this video, one of the things that really sets the PC-24 apart is its ability to go on non-paved surfaces and land on dirt, grass, gravel, and even snow. And this allows the PC-24 to operate in places that you wouldn't normally see a jet, whether that's the Australian outback, rural Alaska, the Idaho backcountry, or even on a dirt strip in New Mexico, like I got to experience. In order to be able to operate on those non-paved runways, they designed the PC-24 to have FOD protection by mounting its engines fairly high up and then using the flaps to shield the engine from ingesting anything. You then install a mud flap on the front wheel and you're ready to go off-road.
You know you're about to have fun in your jet when you throw a mud flap on it.
Exactly.
But another thing that makes it unique is the massive cargo door in the back. It's built to be able to load and haul everything from bikes to motorcycles to patients on stretchers and more. And since the cargo area is part of the pressurized cabin, you can still access everything in there mid-flight. The PC-12, its turboprop counterpart, also has this cargo door, and it was explained to me at the factory that basically they took the feedback from PC-12 customers that they loved everything about the plane, but they just wanted to go faster. So they essentially created the jet version of a PC-12 that could still land on dirt and have a cargo door, but also has the speed and capability of a jet. There's also several other optimizations they made on the exterior of the PC-24 to enhance its short field capability, and one is the shape of its engine nozzles. And they use thrust vectoring at slow speeds to deflect the exhaust air up by approximately 3 degrees. Now I know this doesn't sound like much, but it helps push the tail down and rotate the aircraft and basically reduce overall takeoff distance. Another feature that aids in slow flight is auto roll spoilers. So when the flaps are extended, the roll spoilers will deploy automatically to help with roll control. That left aileron is deflected up and the roll spoiler is doing the same. It's also deflected up and this happens automatically. It's really cool. Additionally, these spoilers will auto-deploy on landing and you don't have to actuate them. So as soon as the airplane touches down, those spoilers deploy on their own. So this combined with anti-skid brakes means you have a lot of stopping power, even though the airplane doesn't use reverse thrust.
Oh, that's so cool.
Another really unique feature is QPM, or Quiet Power Mode, which basically serves as the APU of the aircraft. If you're not familiar with that term, an APU is just the auxiliary power unit. On bigger jets especially, they'll have a separate engine, not used for thrust, but it's a separate engine that can drive the electrical needs of the aircraft when pretty much when it's sitting on the ground. So air conditioning, avionics, that sort of thing. So if you've ever walked around on a ramp before and you hear the hiss of a jet engine, you're like, well, that's weird that jets engines aren't started. That's actually the APU you're hearing. And the PC-24 has a unique feature where the right engine can go into quiet power mode, or QPM, where it runs kind of sub-idle and functions as the APU.
Cool, they got the QPM going, quiet power mode. Honestly, it's pretty quiet and it doesn't have that same like hiss as an APU sometimes has. Sometimes you got the, the whine of a turbine. This just sounds like a real low idle engine, because that's what it is.
So the advantage here is that you don't have another engine to maintain as an APU, but most importantly, running that right engine in QPM or quiet power mode doesn't actually count towards the hours on the engine. So you're not using up the overhaul life of the engine just to be able to run your accessories on the ground. It doesn't count towards that. So it's a pretty unique and smart feature. My other impression when touring every part of this airplane was that all of the really, really little details were absolutely still considered. So even if you take the door covering the single point fueling system, if you were to accidentally leave the valves open and the battery on, when you close the door, the mechanical structure of the door actually turns everything off for you. Now the Kodiak, I'm always scared that I left the switches on for single point fueling or something and it's gonna drain the battery while I'm away and it's all my fault and I gotta pay to replace it. In the PC-24, you literally can't physically make that mistake, and I really appreciate it. As you step inside the cabin, it's obviously very luxurious. I mean, it is gorgeous. And it's also really nice that it has a flat floor throughout. It doesn't dip down in that middle aisle, which is pretty common in jets this size. And that flat floor extends all the way back into that cargo area, and you can configure the seating in a lot of different ways. But it's nice that you can still access everything mid-flight instead of having something stuck in a baggage compartment that you can only access outside of the aircraft. Everything is inside. Now you might be wondering, wait a second, where's the bathroom? Isn't it normally lavatory in the back portion of that jet? And Pilatus actually came up with a pretty ingenious solution for this. So the entryway in the front might not look like a bathroom, but in Transformer style, the whole thing converts into an enclosed bathroom really quickly. So their perspective that they shared with me on this was that for the range of this aircraft, you're probably not gonna need to routinely be using the bathroom a lot. So why waste the entire baggage section with a lav that doesn't get a ton of use? Instead, let's repurpose some of the space up front and not lose any utility in that back cargo compartment. And I gotta hand it to them, that is some really cool engineering. And this takes us into the cockpit, which I will admit is just visually stunning. It is just so clean and really roomy. The yoke goes straight into the instrument panel, so it leaves a ton of room for your legs. There's only a small handful of circuit breakers on the side panel, and the rest are actually managed digitally, which I'll explain later why that's really cool. But you take all these things together, and it looks like a SpaceX cockpit, to be honest. It is really, really beautiful. The whole thing just looks modern and sleek, and even the shape of the windows, I think, wrapped around the cockpit there, from the outside, they just look fast. They look really cool. This airplane has Honeywell avionics in it, which are a lot different than what I'm used to. I'm used to kind of the Garmin environment, G1000, G3000, that sort of thing. But there were actually some pretty cool features of the Honeywell stuff that I really appreciated. I like that you can control pretty much everything with a mouse-like control wheel that's down near the throttles. And this way, it acts very much like a normal computer on the display. You have a mouse on the screen, and you can click things to expand them and click to X off or shut down windows and things. And then you can still use the soft keys on the side of the avionics if you want, but really you can drive everything with that control wheel, just like a mouse. I also really love that you can run checklists on it. I mean, the Garmin stuff will do that too, but the Honeywell just felt very intuitive. And there's buttons on the yoke that you can scroll through the checklist items and check them off and such. So between having one hand on the yoke and one hand on that control wheel that's kind of like a mouse, you can do a lot without actually having to take your hands off of either and reach around the cockpit at all. The avionics are also really smart in that if you have a failure of some kind, you get a CAS message, it'll pull up that emergency checklist for you to go through. And furthermore, most of the circuit breakers, like I mentioned earlier, are actually managed digitally. There's only a few actual physical manual circuit breakers on the pilot side, and the rest are managed within the avionics. So what does this practically mean? Well, it means that you can sort through all the circuit breakers on one screen, and you can turn them on and off, but you can also filter by which ones are tripped, which ones are failed, that kind of thing. So in an emergency, it's really easy to just pull up the emergency checklist on the avionics. And if one part of the checklist says you need to pull this circuit breaker or make sure this circuit breaker is in, it actually pulls up the circuit breaker panel and display for you, and you can filter through it and like really, really quickly get to exactly what you need. And it just really seems to cut down on workload management for the pilot. And it's obvious it's really geared towards single pilot operations. There's a lot that is helping you as the pilot. It also has a lot of intelligent features baked into the UMS, or Utility Management System, which is kind of the brains of the airplane. It's really monitoring everything at all times and helping you as a pilot. It's also helping you from screwing up. Like if you tried to deploy flaps, but you're actually over the flap speed, it won't deploy the flaps and it'll tell you you're over speed. Or it knows when the airplane is on the ground. And so if you try to apply brakes, it's not going to lock up your brakes before the wheel touches the ground and skid a tire or anything like that. So it is monitoring things for you and really, really helping you out as a single pilot. Another feature that was new to me and really cool was the CPD-LC, or Controller Pilot Data Link Communications. Sounds fancy. It's basically a text message communication platform between the pilot and air traffic control. Now, apparently this is common in larger jets, but less common in smaller aircraft, but the PC-24 has it. And I never experienced this before, but it's really, really cool. So you'll get a little ding, and instead of receiving an ATC call, it's actually ATC texting you non-urgent instructions.
Outside air temperature is 40 minus 41.
Nice.
The SAT is minus 23. So I go to new messages here. Contact Denver Center on 24775.
Center maintain 280.
The only thing I can say that I didn't love about the avionics is I think it's kind of hard to do from the right seat. Now, granted, I only had a few flights under my belt, but I'm not left-handed, so doing kind of a mouse control wheel with my left hand felt a little bit clunky, but I bet with some practice you would get there. I'm also just kind of used to the Garmin environment. I think the Garmin graphics might be like a little higher quality, a little less pixelated. But honestly, after a couple flights, I mean, I felt like I had my bearings in the airplane, and it was still really intuitive and has a lot of really cool features. And now for the flight, the best part. We flew from Denver down to southern New Mexico so we could land on a dirt strip and see what this airplane could do. And one of the first things I noticed was just how quiet it was. Like on the ramp, you can barely even tell that the engines were started.
So quiet.
It's super quiet, yeah.
Now on takeoff, this is my first encounter with auto throttles, which were really cool. And you can basically start moving the throttles and it'll know you're trying to set takeoff power, and it will set the power, and then you don't really have to worry about it. Takeoff was really cool. It's neat watching those auto throttles kind of move along and manage speed for you. But then we went all the way up to 45,000 feet, which is a service ceiling of this airplane. You can barely start to see the Earth's curvature. And being up that high brought up a good conversation about depressurization. And once again, the PC-24 has some really, really smart features. So for example, if you had to dump the cabin air because you had a smoke-filled cabin or something, it's not going to all of a sudden go to a cabin pressure altitude of 45,000 feet. And where you only have a few seconds of useful consciousness, it's instead going to dump the cabin air to about 14,000 feet or so, to where you can still breathe, but you can still dump the air. And then in the event of a complete depressurization event, the airplane can actually descend itself and make a turn, go down to about 15,000 feet while you regain consciousness. So there's a lot of really smart features. You can tell the airplane is really helping out the solo pilot. On landing, this is where things started to get really interesting for me, because the approach speed was only around 90 knots, which felt really slow for an airplane that size. And I was really impressed. I mean, you're not coming in that fast, so it seemed really approachable. Pardon the unavoidable pun. And then right before touchdown, I don't know why I got a kick out of this. I just really did. I love that radar altimeter calling out altitudes as you're approaching the ground. It's just so cool hearing the 40, 30, 20, 10. It was cool.
50, 40, 30, 20, 10.
And once you touch down, you can stop in a hurry. I mean, you're not really going that fast to begin with because your approach speed is pretty slow. And then the spoilers deploy automatically. And then you also have anti-skid brakes. So you can really get on the brakes hard, and it does really well. Later in the day, we got to demonstrate a max performance braking situation, which was cool. Like I just couldn't help but laugh because it was really cool to experience.
Oh, that is awesome.
But the coolest part of flying this airplane, no comparison, was getting to land it on a short dirt runway. It was really interesting to me because doing an approach into a grass or dirt runway is nothing really new to me. It's my favorite type of flying, so it felt very normal to try to go land on this dirt strip. And we weren't even going that fast anyway, so it didn't really feel that foreign to me. But I would have to totally pinch myself every now and then and realize, like, yeah, this is familiar, but we're doing this in a jet. And I have never done this in a jet before. And so coming in, you can kind of see, like, I was trying not to be a distraction, but like I was grinning and smiling inside thinking, like, this is so cool. And then once we landed, we stopped really short and it was like no big deal. And I was trying to play it cool. And then eventually I just kind of erupted in laughter because I was like, that was awesome.
I'm trying to play it cool and I can't.
And then after the fact, the coolest part was the drone footage and just seeing the spray of dirt behind us as we're going down that runway. It was just so cool to see a jet doing that. Ah, so fun. Then after landing, we turned around and back taxied for departure to do it all again. And honestly, this was surprising to me. The ride in the jet down the runway was smoother than when we drove it earlier that day in a truck. The FBO was nice there. They helped us check for potholes and stuff. We were bouncing around the truck. But once we got to do it in the jet, both of us, Gerard and I, were looking at each other like, this is actually a lot smoother than the car. Airplane did really great. You can tell it's built for this. And taking off was no big deal. And it was a hot, high density altitude day, but even on dirt, the airplane performed great and we were off. We had a lot of room left, but that's intentional. I mean, because the main limitation is your single engine performance and needing margin in case you did lose an engine during takeoff. But the takeoff and landing here just really showed me the versatility of this airplane is just incredible. So if you'd like to watch our entire flight, including those dirt landings, which were so fun, when it's ready, it will be on the screen, and I know you'll enjoy watching it. So I'll see you in that video.